Specialist with USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and this is a WebNEERS training on the annual update. First part of this training is going to start at the regional level user screen, and you know that we are logged in as a regional user because you see the adults, youth group, and staff sections at the top of the screen. You'll notice that under the staff column, there is a section marked Annual Update / 5-Year Plan, and that's a section we're going to talk a little bit about today. The first piece of that is the Manage Program Impacts. So if you actually click on the Manage Program Impacts button from the regional screen, you'll bring up a screen where you can actually add programmatic impacts. So for those of you who've worked with the annual update before, you'll recognize this as your qualitative success stories. So if you go into the screen for the first time, you might not see anything in this particular table, but in my region, I've entered a few examples, and I'm actually going to show you how to add one. So at the top left, there's a button to add a program impact. And if your user clicks on that, what will happen is it'll bring up a screen that allows them to enter all of the important information about the program impact. This particular training is not going to go into how to fill out a program impact or what type of information is included in your 5-year plan, but rather show you how to use the WebNEERS system. So on this particular screen, the user would simply create a title for the program impact. They could select the date at which that program impact occurred. It's going to default to today's date, but you can certainly change that as needed. They would mark off which focus areas the story related to, as well as any keywords that are related to that program impact, the people involved, and then they would describe the background leading up to the story and the outcomes and the impacts. Now, those of you who've worked with the annual update before will recognize that this looks very similar to the template we've used in the past, so it should be pretty straightforward, but the advantage of having your regional level users enter it is that when they add the program impact, there's this checkbox at the top, Submit for Institute Use. So as soon as they enter that program impact and as soon as they click Save, if this checkbox is marked, it will be available for you to see and to potentially include as part of your annual update. I'm going to navigate back to this program impact page. This is the Manage Program Impact page. And you'll notice on the far left, there's the Options column. You see a couple of different icons. The wrench icon throughout the system is the symbol for edit. So if you click into that, it'll open up whatever impact has been entered, and the person would have the ability to make updates and changes to that particular impact. If they're working on it, aren't finished with it, or don't want you to see it, they can certainly uncheck the Submit for Institute Use option, and that will make it invisible to you at the institution level. But the Edit option allows them to make changes. They also have a Delete button, so if they enter an impact by mistake, they can certainly delete it. But you'll notice I have another example down here, and it does not have a Delete button, and it does not have a wrench icon. And that is because this particular impact was included in an annual update or a 5-year plan. So let's presume that you've already created your annual update, you've submitted it. This is what your users would actually see. So if you've included their impact, the one that they entered at the regional level in your program plan, they're no longer going to be able to delete it from the system. Additionally, if they click into it, you'll notice it's a magnifying glass. The impact is actually going to be locked. So all of the fields are grayed out. They can't make any changes to them. And they'll see a message across the top that says this impact can no longer be edited because it's included in the annual update. So just for your awareness, this is how the system functions as your users add this information and as well as you include these potentially in your 5-year plan or your annual update. So heading back to the home screen, the other thing that your regional users can do, which can be included in your annual update or 5-year plan, is add delivery sites and partnership information. So I'm going to click the Edit Delivery Sites and Partnership button from the home screen, and it's going to bring up a chart. And you'll notice one thing that's a little different from what we looked at on the Program Impacts page is there's no Add button. So there's just one chart for everyone in that region to use. So what this means is if you have one user in one region no problems. They can enter their data, save it, make it available to you. If you have more than one user, they're going to need to work together to enter this information. So that may mean tabulating the totals by hand outside of the system, or having one person enter it for everyone, but you'll just need to work that particular piece out. Something else you'll notice on this particular page is there is a blue question mark. And this is true anywhere in the system. If you actually click on that blue question mark, it's going to give you a definition of the term. So, community partnerships is a little vague, but if you click into it, you'll see that we're defining that as local or community-based organizations your university or institution is working with to meet programmatic goals, and so on. So that should really help your users enter the information appropriately. You may need to still provide some guidance, but hopefully within the annual update section and within the system, we've tried to add enough definitions and information that people can understand what is requested of them. So I've already entered some basic information into this particular region, but all they would need to do is scroll to the bottom and click Save. You'll notice that I've added some other examples, so if there's something beyond what's captured in this chart that they'd like to add, you can just click Add Other and create a name for that particular item and enter the data. One thing to be aware of is that at the institution level, if you review the delivery sites and partnerships by region, you'll be able to see what they entered under Other. But within the annual update, it's going to tabulate everything that's under Other together. So in this situation, for the delivery sites, Other would say 70, and for community partnerships, it would say 15. So adding the 5 and the 10 together. So I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to actually log out of the system and log back in as an institution level user. So at the institution level, you also have an annual update 5-year plan section. So that's on the top left of the screen. And where I want to start is how you can sort of review the information that we just talked about that's coming in from the regional level. You'll notice there's a button for Manage Program Impacts, and if you click on that, what it's going to bring up is a list of all of the impacts that all of your regions have submitted. So I just have a couple of examples listed in here. You could have as many as you receive. So this could be a rather long list. Similar to what you saw at the regional level, you have some with just a magnifying glass, which you can't make edits to because they're already included on a 5-year plan or an annual update. And then you have the ones with the edit option or the delete. Now in this case, delete does not actually remove the program impact completely from the system. That's because the regional level user entered it, and so they would be the only one that could officially delete it from the system. But if you take a look at it and it's not a very good impact or wasn't really what you were looking for, you can actually hide it from your view. So take it out of the clutter of this particular table. So if you click that delete button and then say OK, you'd like to hide it, it will disappear from your table. And then you also have this button at the top to view hidden program impacts. So you can use that to toggle over to the other screen. So if you hid one by mistake, you could unhide it by clicking the checkbox, and then it would reappear on your active program impacts. So again, you have this toggle button at the top to move between the active and the inactive program impacts. The other cool thing about this screen is that you have your search box at the top, and so let's say for example you have a list of 20 impacts that you've received and you wanted to find one from a particular region or about a particular focus area. You could just start typing in the box what you're looking for. So say I wanted one on weight management. As I type the word weight, it narrows down my results to just those that have the keyword weight in it. Or if I wanted something related to diet quality, I could start typing diet quality, and it will narrow down my list. Well, unfortunately everything has diet quality in it, so it's not going to narrow my list. But if I typed physical activity, it would bring up just the one that's tagged with physical activity. So when you're using the search box, it's going to search all of the textual fields for title, submitted by, keywords, people, focus, etc. So you can really quickly find the information you're looking for. At the institution level, if you do have this wrench icon, you can open up an example from your region, and if you make a change to it, you can actually save that change and it will be reflected at the regional level. So you'll see in the background I put this is not right, fix it. So you can make changes, edit. So if they've made some grammatical errors or you want to touch it up a little bit, maybe they checked off the wrong boxes, anything you need to do, make those changes, hit save, and then that will be reflected all the way through the system. So you will see the update, and then they will also see that update. The other thing that you will notice on the screen is that you have an Add Program Impact button. So what this means is at the institution level, you can actually enter the stories yourself. So if you prefer to enter them at the institution level, you have the same screen as what I showed you at the regional level, and you can simply enter the program impact yourself. And once you save that impact, it'll be available on your list and something you can select to include in your annual update. Now, the next section I wanted to talk about is the Manage Delivery Sites and Partnerships. So as you recall, I showed you at the regional level, you can actually enter the delivery sites and partnerships information for your region. At your institution level, you aren't actually able to edit it. So this is a little different from the program impacts, but you'll see you have the magnifying glass. So every region that you have in your system, so I have 3 regions in my system, you will be able to preview what they have in there. So if I click on the magnifying glass, it'll open the information and I can take a look at it and see if it looks acceptable to me or not. Everything's grayed out because I can't make any changes to it. But if I take a look at this and I say, oh wow, 0 work sites, that doesn't look right, I could contact that region, have them update it. As soon as they click save, I should be able to, and I refresh my screen, I should be able to see that information. The other thing you'll notice here is that you can actually add a delivery site and partnership record for the institution level. So let's say you wanted to enter this data at the institution level instead of having your regions enter it. I could create one here. So let's say it's Clemson University delivery sites and partnerships. I could enter that information and then I could just start typing in the numbers as appropriate here. When I save this particular record, populates my table. You'll notice that I have a delete option, so if I made a mistake, I can get rid of it. I can go back in and edit it. But what you'll also notice is that I have another institute option, so if I narrow my chart using the search box to just those in the institute that are from the institute, you'll see I have another one that doesn't have a delete option. And that is because I have, as before with the program impacts, included it in part of an annual update submission. So if you don't have that delete option, that means that it was selected in something that you sent forward to the federal office. Now you still do have an edit icon, so you have this wrench still, and the reason for that is that you can actually make changes to this chart. Your regional users can make changes to this chart and you can save them, but it's not going to impact your annual update unless the person submitting the annual update actually refreshes their data. So I'll show you how to do that once we get into the plan, but just be aware that at any point in time, if this data looks incorrect, users can actually go in and make those edits. So I'm going to head back to the home screen and click into the Manage Annual Updates section. Now, I have a couple things listed in my table, but if this is your first time using this section, it may be empty. You'll see at the top there's a button to add the annual update. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to bring up a screen where I can actually create my plan. So I'm just going to enter some basic data. Your plan name can really be anything. I would suggest creating something that makes sense to you. You're not going to be able to edit the plan name once you create the plan, so sort of similar to creating a custom ID or a system ID as a regional user. That's what's locked into place. So I would suggest thinking about it before you enter it in there, but again, it should just be something that makes sense to you. Enter your fiscal year, and then you want to enter the contact information. So likely this is the program coordinator. Anything that is outlined in red is a required field. So that's consistent with the rest of the WebNEERS system. Red outlined fields are required, not red outline, or those that have a black outline, I guess I should say, are not required. So I'm just entering some basic information here, and you can do the same in yours. Now, when you get down to the Extension Director Administrator section, when we do an annual update, we do not require that the Extension Director or Extension Administrator sign off on your plan, unless that is something that's required at your university. However, at the point that we do a 5-year plan, so the last time we did a 5-year plan was 2010, for example, we then projected out for the years 2010 through 2015, made our plans, and then each year in between we did an annual update. So the annual update revises that 5-year plan. At the point that you submit your next annual update, we will want your Extension Director or Administrator to take a look before you send it forward. So I've entered my information, and I'm going to scroll to the bottom and click Save to actually create my plan. And what you'll notice is I get an alert on the upper right-hand corner that says my update was successfully created and the screen has changed. So at the very top, you'll see your title is locked in. So I titled mine Clemson University Annual Update. And you now have a series of tabs. So this is very similar to what you would experience in the rest of WebNEERS. You see that we are currently in the Contact tab. I click on the word Situation. I'll bring up the Situation tab, the priorities, inputs, etc. Something to keep in mind is that when you click on the tabs, you do need to scroll down because there's information that needs to be entered throughout. And you'll notice that some of the fields are circled in red. So again, those are your required areas. I'll also mention that at the very bottom you have Save, Cancel, and Submit buttons. What I wanted to let you know is that the Save button, and this is true throughout WebNEERS, is going to actually save every change you've made on every tab. So it's not going to just save the current tab that you're working in. It's going to save if you made changes to the situation, the priorities, and the inputs, and then you hit save, it'll save everything that you entered in those 3 tabs. Same with the cancel. If you opened your record, made a change on a couple of tabs, and then realized you made some mistakes, if you hit cancel, it's going to cancel all those changes that you made. This is important to keep in mind because if I was to click save right now, going to save and close my record. And so that could become frustrating if you're trying to enter some information and you want to get several tabs done. So the way you can avoid that is just enter all the information you want to enter and then click save, and it will capture everything that you've entered up to that point. Now, one thing that is different is that you noticed I didn't actually fill in information in some of these required fields, but I was still able to save. Now that's different from the way it would work in an adult record, for example. The reason for this is that we wanted it to be so that if you wanted to enter some of your information now and some of it later, you would be able to. So this annual update section is set up so that you can enter the information as you have time, save it at any point, but then at the point of submission, so if I were to scroll down to the bottom and click Submit for Federal Review, that's the point that it's going to check for those required fields. So you see I tried to submit it, and on the top right I get this error message that my update is incomplete, can't be submitted, and I have to address some errors. And then it's going to give you a list of all the issues. So all the things that were required that you did not fill out and where to find them. So for example, on the Situation tab, the situation is empty. So to get back, you just use on the breadcrumb trail, it says Edit Annual Update. Click on that and it'll bring you back to the plan so you can continue working and make those updates. So as I said before, I'm not going to really go into what is required for each of these fields, but what you'll notice is that underneath the heading for a particular field, there is a definition of what's expected there. So in the past, on our template for the annual update, this information was provided in an instruction sheet. Well, now it's all just built into the system. Again, you have some blue question marks, so if something is not clear, you can click on that and get an additional definition. For pieces like the situation, you can actually, if you have that information in a Word document, so for example, if you're working from an old plan that you developed in Word, you can copy and paste that information from Word into WebNEERS. Or if you just want to write it in a Word document and then copy and paste it over, you can do that as well. The system does suggest some character limits, but I did want you to know that those are suggested character limits. The system is not going to cut you off if you're over by a few characters or more than a few characters, but that is the suggested amount to use. We do want you to include all the pertinent information, but we also would like you to be concise where possible. So on this particular tab, you would enter the situation, scroll down, and you would enter the geographic area. Now this is pretty cool, and you can't really see a good example of this because my system is set up for District of Columbia. The geographic area is actually going to display a list of all of the counties or parishes within your particular state or territory. And so rather than having to type them in, you can just check off the ones that you're currently working in or that you plan to work in the coming year. You then have a field where you can describe the geographic area. And again, if you have this information in Word, you can copy and paste it. And same for the target audience. Priorities tab is a little bit different because you're going to have to actually add each priority individually. So you'll see I have a couple in here already, but if I had a new priority to add, I would just simply press this Add Priority button. And it's going to bring up a screen that looks pretty similar to what we looked at for the impacts, where you can just enter the title of your priority, check off the focus areas. Throughout the system, I haven't been mentioning this on every tab or on every screen, but you'll see a lot of add buttons here and there, and that's just if there's something you want to include as part of the items that you tag or the information that you submit. All you have to do is click this add button and enter the information. As you scroll down through the priority, you'll have the space where you can provide the description of what you plan to do. This may be something you can copy and paste, but then you actually have the measurement section. And in this particular section, it's going to ask you, is this a priority that can be measured numerically, or is it something that cannot? So if it can, and you select yes, it's going to bring up a chart, and this should look similar to something you've seen before if you've worked with the annual update before. But basically you can just mark off what type of unit of measure you're using. So let's say, for example, you're measuring improvement in food safety practices. So what I would expect is that you would have your baseline value. So the first year that you're starting from is your baseline. So in this case, you may have 2010 data as your baseline. So let's say in 2010, 50, and I selected percent, 50% of folks were reporting improvement in one or more food safety practice. So the row for actual, the column for baseline. I don't have a target because that's where I'm starting from. Then for years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I would project out what I'm hoping to achieve. So let's say, for example, I wanted to improve by 2% each year. So my target for the first year is 52, add an additional 2% in year 2, year 3, year 4, and so by year 5 I would be up to 60%. That's my target. So the entire target row should be filled out. Additionally, the year's worth of data that you have should be filled out. So if this was 2010, for example, you would put in your actual result for 2011, 2012, 2013, and so on. So it should include all the data that you have. the next year's annual update, you would go back in and actually update this value. And so that's the importance of this particular table. Now, let's say, for example, it wasn't a numeric priority. It was something that needed to be more descriptive. If you select no, you actually get a different table. So it's set up a little differently, but it allows you to enter a narrative description of where you were your first year, so your baseline year, the year you're starting from, and then add it a description of what you're trying to achieve, and then an actual description of what you did achieve. So first column is the target, what you're shooting for, and the second column is your actual, so what you actually achieved. And then as you scroll down, in both cases, either chart that you use, you have a comment section, and this is where you can just sort of justify any changes you might need to make if you didn't meet your targets, if you really exceeded your targets and needed to update them, any of that kind of information you could record here. I'm going to just close out of this because I didn't add any information, but you would typically save this so that it would be recorded in your table. So you'll see here I have 4 examples in my table. So the instructions say develop 3 to 5 SMART program priorities, 2 to 3 must be measuring core areas. I can create more than 5, but a maximum of 5 can be submitted. So this would look like it was okay to submit, correct? Well, the issue is none of these are actually included as part of your submission until you check them off. So in the select column, you need to check off those priorities that you want to send forward. So as it said above, you can create more than 5. So you may have some that you're working on just at the institution level that you don't want to send forward to the federal office. If you leave those unchecked, the federal office will not be able to see them. If you do check them off, then I'll be able to review them and provide some feedback. Much like the other screens, you have the wrench icon to edit and the delete option to get rid of a priority that you entered inadvertently. On the Inputs tab, this has a couple of pretty cool features. The first is it actually has a link to your budget sheet. So it'll bring up your budget sheet if you click on that hyperlink. And it also has a link to your budget justification. So same thing, if I were to click on this, it would bring up a copy of my budget justification. Mine are both blank because, again, I'm just showing you sort of an example. What it's going to show in this top portion is your most recently approved budget submission. So in my case, I have submitted my preliminary budget and justification. So I don't know what the actual allocation is for the year. I'm sending it forward. So this is what you would typically include when you submit your annual update. And mine was approved by the federal office, so it's showing here. Later in the year, hopefully our federal budget will pass. We'll know what our actual allocation amounts will be. And at that point, and this is all done on a separate screen, if you reviewed the module on the budget and budget justification, there's actually a separate button on the home screen to manage the budget and justification. From that particular screen, I would upload my final budget sheet and create my final budget justification. Once those are submitted and approved by the national office, that's what's going to show within the plan. And so the purpose of having this here is just so you can see all of your information, your plan, your budget, everything all in one place. As you scroll down, you'll see a section to record other funds received. So if anyone worked in the old WebNEERS 5 system, this will look a little familiar. It's sort of an updated version of the Interagency Cooperation Report. So that was something that was typically submitted by the regional level users, but now it's captured within the annual update by the institution level user. Again, you have these blue question marks to help you define what we're looking for in this particular funding type. And this would be a record of what you actually received the last fiscal year. So it's not projecting forward, it's actually reporting what you did receive. So the budget and the budget justification is your expectation of what you will receive and what you will do with that money. And this is a record of additional funds beyond what you received from NIFA or FNEP, what additional funds you received beyond that. As you scroll down, you have a section to record your curricula information. Again, this can be copied and pasted out of Word. And then you have your interorganizational relationships chart. Now, the trick to this one is that for every single agency, organization, or partner that's listed in this chart, so every single row, you have to indicate what type of relationship you have. So the primary type of relationship you have with that group. That relationship could be none. So if you are in a state that does not have an 1890 university, for example, that particular row you would mark none. But the important thing is that something is checked off in every single row. If you need some information on what these particular relationship types are defined as, you can click your question mark to get some more information. If you had an other type of agency or organization you wanted to record, you could enter it here and then just signify the relationship type. And then at the bottom, you can describe the interorganizational relationship. So enter a description about this information. On the Outputs tab, this is where you get to record your delivery sites, locations, and community partnerships. So what you'll notice on this particular screen is you have a list of regions. So every region you have in the system is listed here. And then if you had entered an institute level record, so from that Manage Delivery Sites and Community Partnerships page, if you had actually clicked the button to add an institute level record, that would be evidenced here as well. So you'll see on my screen I have 2 there, and parenthetically it's marked as institute to make those stand out from the others. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and you will notice that my delivery sites and community partnerships chart has all zeros. And that's because I have not entered any data yet. So if I want to include the data from all my regions, I can just check off the regions, and as I do so, it's going to aggregate the data that I have in the system. So you'll notice that as I checked off these boxes, the numbers tabulated themselves. So that's one of the advantages of having your regions enter the information, is you can simply check those off and aggregate it. The system will aggregate it for you. Again, I would recommend checking these out in the Manage Delivery Sites and Partnerships section first. And that way, if there are some issues, you could have your regions go ahead and update those prior to including them in the annual update. But let's say you're working on the annual update, you notice something's wrong, you've checked off these boxes, but they go back and make the change. So this is what I was talking about. They could go in and edit at any time. Once they make the change, it's not going to automatically upload here because checking off these regions essentially locks in that data. But if I then uncheck the box and recheck it, it will refresh the numbers and recalculate it based on the most current information. So this is important to note. Again, what I was trying to share with you here is that checking off a particular region locks the data in. So once you've checked it off, it's going to pull in the most up-to-date information that the system has, and that's locked into this particular screen for your annual update. If the region then makes some changes, if you want them to show up in your annual update, you need to uncheck their box and recheck it, and it will update with the most current information. Another thing to know about this particular chart is that you can actually make manual updates. So let's say I'm looking at adult rehabilitation centers. It says 10 and it should be 100. So I could actually type in 100, save that at the point that I'm ready to save, and that's what it will look like in my annual update. However, the other thing you'll notice is I changed adult rehabilitation centers to 100, but if I then uncheck something and recheck it, it goes back to 10. So any manual changes are going to be overridden if you select or deselect the regions above. So the best way to handle changes is to actually go into the regional record, or have your region go into the regional record, or for you to update your institution record, and that way it will be saved. But if you need to make some changes on the fly, you can certainly do it within the annual update. After you've selected all the options, you can scroll down. Here's where I was talking about for the other. It's just sort of aggregating everything you have. The one I showed you had, I think, 60 and 15, so there must have been some other things that were added by other regions, and that's fine. And then at the very bottom, you would enter a description. So whether you intend to expand, eliminate, or relocate program delivery sites in the coming year. The next two tabs are a little different. These are new. We have the environmental settings and the SOI, which is sectors of influence. And these are related to the socio-ecological model. So environmental settings is to capture the work that you're already doing at the organization or community level. You can see that in this gray box at the top. And the sectors of influence is things you're already doing across sectors of influence, such as government, media, industry, agriculture, healthcare, and other systems. So the intent of this section is to show that FNEP is making a difference beyond just that direct education. So we know that there's other things that you all are doing in your communities, at your organization, and throughout government, media, etc. And we want to be able to say what those things are. So, you know, the first year we record this information, you may not have a lot to report, but maybe in the coming years you'll have some additional things you can share with us. The way that you complete this section is you would scroll down. You have short-term indicators, and what you would do is just read each of these items and decide. For example, for the second item, it's commit to collaborate to address identified needs. Are you doing that with organizations and communities related to diet quality? Yes or no. Physical activity? Yes or no. And so on. So yes, if you are, check the box. If you're not, don't check the box. As you scroll down, very similar for medium term and long term, you have the boxes that you need to check off to signify if you're doing certain activities. But the difference is that you now have a tab structure. So similar to what we've been using throughout this annual update, you read all the items for diet quality, and then you would click the word physical activity to bring up the examples in the physical activity tab. If there's something that you're doing that's not included in this list, you do have this add other option. And again, the long-term indicators is exactly the same. You have the tabs to allow you to check off the things you're doing in the long term in these various areas. If you scroll to the very bottom, you can also add a qualitative example. And so if I click on the Add Qualitative Example button, it's going to bring up a screen that is going to look pretty familiar to you. So it's very much the same as a program, a qualitative program impact. Provide a title, the date, focus areas, background, outcomes and impacts, and then you would just save it. The trick to this is that you'll only be able to include this particular example if you've selected something at the medium or the long term. So we're really not looking for examples, qualitative examples, if you're only working in the short term, and the system will actually prevent you from including it if that's all you've checked off. So you have your options to edit the example or delete it, and in order to make sure that it's visible at the federal level, you would have to check off this select box. Sectors of influence has one key difference, and that is that at the top you have a chart to indicate organizational involvement. So indicate the number of organizations that were involved in these particular initiatives. But then the rest is very much the same. So you would just check off what you're doing in the short term related to the 5 core areas. Medium and long term, you have your tabs where you need to read through and check off the ones that you're doing. And then at the bottom, you can add a qualitative example if appropriate. And then to include it in your submission, you would check the box to select it. The last tab is the Impacts tab, and what you're going to see here is all of the impacts that have either been submitted at the regional level or entered at the institution level and that are not hidden. So on that Manage Program Impacts page that we were on previously, if you chose to hit the delete button to hide the impact, it would not be visible in this table. You can still hide the impact from within the plan, so if you're reading through and you decide you don't want it to be visible in your Manage Program Impact screen, you can hide it from here as well. You can also edit from within this screen. So I could go in, make some changes. And the other cool thing is, if I want to, as I scroll through, there is a section where I can include this particular impact as associated with a program priority. So if this impact is youth gain confidence after increasing physical activity, and I have a physical activity program priority, obviously my program priority titles are not very good. I just put something in quickly. Hopefully yours would be more descriptive and explain what exactly you're doing, and I'm assuming that this is physical activity related to children, and that's why this impact is related. But anyways, you can tie the two together to further substantiate the work that you're doing. So it's not just that you're improving your numbers, but you also have some narrative success stories to share. Again, you have these magnifying glasses for ones that have already been included in a plan. And then you have your select options. So only those that you check off are going to come forward to the national office. If it is not checked, it's not going to go forward. And the final thing I wanted to share with you in the annual update section is this comments button, and that's on the top right. And this is actually where you could send a comment forward to the federal office. So when you go to submit, if you had anything to share with the national office, you could put it here. So occasionally people will send me, in the past they would send me an email on the side and say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up, this has changed and this is why. Anything that's not necessarily something that should be included in your plan, but you want me to be aware of, click the Add Comment button. It'll make a record of it. And then in order for me to see it, you actually have to publish it. So you can actually add comments that are just for your purposes. If you don't publish it, it won't be visible when you submit to the federal office, but if you do, I'll be able to see it and respond to it. So now I'm going to actually save this and return to my Manage Annual Updates page, and I wanted to show you a few other things. So that particular example, I obviously didn't enter any information into it, so I wanted to show you a couple of things. First of all, you have the status column, and that's going to tell you the current status of your plan. So the one I was just working on, this Clemson University annual update, doesn't have a status, and that's because I haven't submitted it to the federal office. So I still have the option to delete it. I have my edit button, so I still have my wrench available to me, and that is because it hasn't been submitted. Now the ones above it are marked with different statuses. So the very first one is marked pending. So that means that I have submitted it to the federal office, but they have not reviewed it yet. So I do have a magnifying glass icon, and I can actually click into it. If I need to make changes to my plan, I can. If I make a change and then I hit save, it'll tell me that I've already submitted this, but the changes are going to be automatically submitted to the federal office. So as long as I didn't take away something that was required, I could just do that to make a change. Now let's say you submitted this plan and you've got some major issues. So it's not something that you can just quickly type, change, resubmit with the save button. You can actually cancel the submission. So as long as your plan is still marked as pending, you can click the button at the bottom. It will now say cancel submission, and once you do so, if you return to the Manage Annual Updates page, you'll see that you no longer have a status. You can now delete it if you need to, and then you can go back in and make edits. And so at the point that you're comfortable and want to submit it again, you have your Submit for Federal Review button back again. Click that button. Annual update was successfully submitted, and the status goes back to pending. Now let's say your status is needs revision. Well, in that case, you also have just the magnifying glass, but when you open it, you're going to see something a little different, and that is that the tabs either are checked or unchecked. A checked tab means that the federal office reviewed the particular tab and approved the information that you submitted. So the contact tab meets approval, priorities tab looks good, so does inputs, but you'll notice the situation tab is not checked. So there must be some sort of problem on this tab that you need to fix. To see what's wrong, you would click in the comments. So again, I showed you how to send a comment, but this is also how the federal office will send comments back to you. So you'll see on the 7th, I wrote to you that your target audience does not include both low-income families and low-income youth. Please revise. So that would indicate to me that I would need to go back in, Situation tab, scroll down to the target audience, and update that information. Once I do so, you'll see the button now says Submit Revisions for Federal Review. So I can, after I've made my changes, resubmit. And then what you'll see is that your status is now changed to revised. So that'll signify to me at the federal level that you've made the changes and I can go back in. If the tab looks okay, I would check it to lock it and then send it back to you as approved. Now let's say I cancel this submission, so I want to be able to edit it. And let's say one of the tabs is checked, but I want to go in and make changes. What will happen is you'll get prompted that you should only uncheck the tab if you intend to make changes, because you're going to have to resubmit and get that particular tab reapproved. So if I cancel out of that, it won't keep the change. But the important thing to note is that if a tab is approved, you really shouldn't uncheck it unless you really need to make a change. And so in this particular example, if I did make a change, I could uncheck the tab, make that change, and then resubmit it, and all would be fine. But again, you shouldn't just uncheck the tabs for any reason other than you legitimately need to make a change. Now, the other thing that you can do, and I haven't talked about this button yet, is you have this clone option. So the icon with the 2 squares allows you to clone your annual update. And so if you actually click on this button, it's going to make a duplicate copy of your plan. So you'll see right here, I duplicated Clemson University Annual Update, and now I have Clemson University Annual Update cloned on 11/07/2013. And so the reason you have that option available to you is that you can make a duplicate copy of your plan that you can work within and potentially submit at a later date without unchecking your tabs and messing up your approval status. So let's say, for example, it's next summer, it's August, you want to start working on your plan. You can click this button, make a duplicate copy, make the edits you want to make, and then have it ready to submit to the federal office. So rather than retyping all the information each year, you can actually make a clone of it. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that all of this information that we covered here is included in the instructions for the annual update, and we've added a new feature within WebNEERS. At the very top, you'll see a link to the manuals. So if you click on that, it will bring up all of the instruction guides that we have thus far in the system. So your general user manual, budget justification instructions, annual update instructions, and then as well code books for the export. So if you export your raw data, information on how to use that. So there may be some additional user manuals added in the future, but this is where you can find the instructions as well as on our NIFA WebNEERS webpage. And with that, that concludes the annual update training module. Thank you very much.